Strategy Outdoors is brought to you by Jackie's Deer Lures, Wicked Tree Gear, Pennington Wildlife Seed, and XOP Tree Stands. Strategy Outdoors.
Welcome to Strategy Outdoors. When we think big buck strategy, one month always stands out, and that's the month of November. As we all know, that's when the big boys get on their feet and the rut action kicks in. Every year I look forward to November and I take a vacation. This past year, 2015, I was limited on the amount of places I had to hunt. I had one small piece of property that I'd been used to hunting on for the past several years, and then I had picked up a larger piece of property a little further away from home. The larger piece of property, I moved in some trail cameras, obviously doing some scouting as I hunted, and moved trail cameras around and started picking up some pictures of a really nice 10-point and a few solid 8 and 9 points. So I made a plan. I thought, you got to stay on the sign. I moved in, hung over a scrape line, and began to have some pretty good rut action on about November the 2nd. As I saw these deer up on the hillside, I knew that if I would call to them just by their actions, that they would probably most likely come in to check me out. The bigger buck did not, but the younger buck did. He's a beautiful 2-year-old buck. Working this scrape, I knew that in a few years this would be a pretty nice shooter. Then a few days later, I was hunting on one of the small pieces of property near my home, and I had an encounter with a buck that we call Sergeant. He's got a rack that tilts forward out over his nose, kind of like a sergeant's hat tips forward in the military, and so we named him Sarge. Sarge is only 3 years old. He's a 7-point. He's going to be a nice buck for the future, but it was just nice to have this encounter with him. So on the smaller property that I was familiar with hunting with, I'd had a trail camera out there since the beginning of the season, and the trail cam pics started rolling in as the month of October progressed. The deer started getting bigger. The closer to November I got, suddenly I started getting daylight activity. So it's November the 11th, it's the afternoon hunt, and I'm headed into the stand hoping for a chance at one of these big giant bucks. It's about 3:30 on November the 11th. I've been set up in the stand for about a half hour. Thought I'd do a quick interview. I've got a trail camera in here. I've been in this spot several times. I've done several interviews here. I hunted here all day on Monday. The wind was wrong and I didn't hardly see a deer. But yesterday my trail camera showed a buck I call Turkey Foot. He's a giant 8-pointer with a G4. He's actually a 9, and then he's got a little crab claw on the end of the same side. So I call him Turkey Foot. Looks like a turkey's foot on the end of his beam. So Turkey Foot was in here morning and evening yesterday, going to and from a field out here. He's probably cruising looking for does. I've had multiple pictures of him in the daylight and the dark going through this spot in the past 3 or 4 days. So with that kind of intel, you've got to hunt these kind of spots. Besides Turkey Foot, there is a giant 10-pointer in here with a flyer off his G2. I've only got a couple pics of that deer. He cruised through one time. He hasn't been back through at least past the camera. He didn't like the camera too well though, so he might be in the area just shying away from that camera. And then a new buck just showed up on this card pole before I climbed in the tree tonight. There's a big gnarly, looks like a 10-point with maybe some trash and like his beam droops down or something. So definitely ought to be a good sit tonight. I'm excited. I hope to show you some good action here before long. That evening's hunt was uneventful with only a few does showing up. But according to the trail camera pictures, a buck I called Turkeyfoot had been making a daylight appearance every other day. That brought November the 12th. That morning I headed into the stand. It was very, very windy. I had even thought about not going. It was one of those overcast, dreary, cold mornings, and the wind was howling, but I knew I had to give it a chance. As the morning unfolded and I sat there with high anticipation, I looked up at about an hour after daylight, and here come the Turkeyfoot buck. Just shot the Turkeyfoot buck, just like we wanted. He come through here right after daylight, coming back from a hayfield and going back to where they bed. He's been through here about every other morning, and I was finally here this morning, but the shot looked low and back. I'm really concerned about it. I wanted it up in that shoulder, and I don't know what happened right there at that last minute. I don't know if the wind was moving, because it's moving my tree a lot, or if I was shooting through a hole in some branches. I don't know if I tipped a limb. Don't know what happened, but I think if we give him some time, we'll get him. November the 12th, babe. You gotta love November. Ooh, yeah, baby. It's 2:50 in the afternoon. It's been a little over 7 hours since I shot that buck this morning. Went back and reviewed the footage. It looks like I stuck that arrow right through the liver, maybe right through the diaphragm. We're hoping we cut the diaphragm wide open because that would really help us. Definitely not the hit I was wanting. I don't know what the factors was or the reason why I hit back. I had it held in there solid and it just didn't go there. So what we have found is a decent blood trail. Even in 7 hours we come back, there's been a lot of wind blowing, which is going to hurt us. The leaves have been turning over, but we're still finding the blood trail. So we're going to continue to follow it. Hopefully it gets better. I saw the deer run about 200 yards, as you could see on the footage, disappeared, running as hard as he could go. And we're hoping we find him bedded up and dead. So we've given him a full 7 hours before we even step foot back in this woods. And we're going to follow this blood trail, and hopefully we got the turkey foot buck at the end of the trail. There's blood. We looked hard the rest of the evening for the turkey foot buck without any success. I reviewed the footage over and over again, and that shot was a little back, but it was definitely in the liver and possibly even got the backside lung. I knew this deer had to be dead out there somewhere, so I was headed back the next morning with my father's assistance to give it another try to see if we could find the turkey foot buck. We just got the camera turned on because I see the buck laying up here ahead of me. We have stomped hundreds of yards looking for this deer, and we actually found him about 75 yards from where last blood was, and he didn't go 175 yards from the tree stand. So he's laying up here. Let's go take a look at him. Yeah. It's November the 13th. Yesterday on the 12th, I had decided to hunt this spot. I've been trying not to overhunt it, and every time I'm not here, there are several big bucks that are. One in particular showed up daylight several times, and that's this big buck here. We called him Turkey Foot because of all this stuff out here on the end of his beam, and I really like this deer. I thought if he comes in, I'm going to shoot him. I believe he's 5 years old. He's at least 4.5, but I believe he's a 5.5-year-old buck. He's very mature, big-bodied, heavy rack. He's just basically a giant 8-point with this stuff on the end of his beam. So I thought if I see that deer, I'm going to shoot him. I come in on the night before the 11th, and I seen on my trail camera this buck had been in 3 times the day before. So I thought on the 12th I'm going to go in and I am going to be there. I'm going to sit all day if I have to. When that buck shows up, I'm going to be there. Well, 7:20 in the morning I looked up and here he come. Man, it was windy. I didn't know if the deer was going to move or not, but they did. And several bucks were moving through the woods, and this buck decided to come in at 23 yards. I put an errant shot on him, but I'm shooting a Rage broadhead, which I would highly recommend. That big broad 2-inch cut does its job, and this deer went about 200 yards and stopped, and there was a big pool of blood, and after that not another drop, and we could not find him. We stomped all around going the direction that he had went, and what he had done was turn around and come back almost towards the tree and laid down, and we're 150 to 175 yards from the tree. And my dad come back in here this morning and helped me look for this deer, and we actually looked towards the way he was running in a big clear cut. But then finally, we decided to come back where we found last blood and start grid searching from there. And one little tiny thicket that we had not stepped into the night before, we stepped into it this morning, and here he laid. I am thrilled that we finally got the turkey foot buck down. We've got him recovered. I can't wait to get him home, show him to my family and friends, and celebrate. We appreciate you watching Strategy Outdoors. Thankfully, I finally got to lay my hands on the turkey foot buck. I'm so thankful that we doubled back and began to grid search out from where we found last blood, and that's a lesson to be learned. Sometimes we try to decide in our minds where that deer is going to go, but that deer actually had died probably 5 minutes after I shot him. He had stopped, he had turned, buckled right back towards the tree stand, and laid down on the side of the same ridge that I was hunting. When I found that last blood and seen the direction the deer was headed, in my mind he was headed to a clear cut that was about 300 yards ahead of us, and that's the direction I searched in and searched in and searched in, and obviously couldn't find the deer. But when I went back and rethought the situation and said, I've got to go to last blood, I went to last blood and began to grid search out from there. It never dawned on me before to head back towards the tree stand, but when I did, there he laid. I could have found him the night before. He was only 75 yards from me. But thankfully, we did the right thing. We put in our time and we found the turkey foot buck. Man, it felt good to lay my hands on him. We appreciate you coming to Strategy Outdoors and watching our web show. We enjoy getting to share them with you. And we hope that the next time we have an episode, you will come back to watch it right here at strategyoutdoors.com.